So I've long believed that there really are two kinds of pastors. And one kind is the kind who pastors to preach, and the other kind is that which preaches to pastor. And you're like, what? What's the difference? Well, one who pastors to preach would be that congregational leader who's involved in people's lives, invested in those tender moments in their lives, it not exclusively, but in part to earn credibility so that those same people will be more willing to hear that person deliver a message on Sunday. And then other pastors, they preach so that they can then pastor, meaning they deliver a message on a Sunday out of the hopes and the desires that the congregation and the congregants will then invite them in again to those tender places in their own lives. So some people pastor to preach, other people preach to pastor. And just since I've been thinking about it in these terms for more than a few years, I realize that I pastor to preach, that my motivations, and neither one is right and neither one is wrong, but my motivations primarily for doing good pastoral care is so that I can then have that depth of relationship that frankly will make people want to connect with us in public worship on a Sunday morning. So they're being pastored so that they will then be discipled through what they hear in preaching. Pastoring to preach, preaching to pastor. Hey, I know me well enough to know that I would be a terrible, traveling evangelist, itinerant preacher, someone just on the conference circuit. Because I have this deep conviction that real preaching isn't imposed upon the congregation, it emerges from it. And so as I have pastored this congregation for more than 20 years, I've developed relationships. I know what people are struggling with. I hear their stories. Sadly, I hear the ways that some people keep doing the same dumb things over and over and over. But my point in all that is that my preaching in so many ways emerges out of what people are going through in their lives. Now, do not hear what I am not saying. My preaching always comes from the Bible. And what I'm talking about is that what then comes from the Bible gets informed by, is brought to life by what people are going through in their lives. So as I'm involved in pastoral counseling or pastoral visitation or just the life of the church, I'm always listening for anecdotes or patterns that will ultimately find their way into Sunday morning messages. So why does knowing your congregation matter if you want to preach well? I guess I really do believe that in the pastoral role, there are really these three arenas. There's preaching, proclamation, pastoring, and leading. Preaching, pastoring, leading. And in my experience, and maybe I'm making my experience count for everybody, but I think it's almost impossible to do all three of those well. I think it's almost impossible to be an expert in all three, primarily because people who are really good leaders, they're always looking forward and they're mobilizing other leaders, they tend not to be great at pastoring. They're not great at being by your bedside, and they're not great at helping people through issues involving their own past, because great leaders are forward directed. And so in my own experience, I feel like I'm stronger at the preaching and stronger at the pastoring. And if I ever have any leadership successes, I just luck into them. Or I get there because I'm self-aware enough to know I'm not a great leader, and maybe I need other people who are really good leaders around me. I talk a lot that I'm pretty good with the large crowd, 1,000. And I'm good with one. It's the in-between that I don't feel is my sweet spot, 12 or 15, leading a smaller team towards a desired goal. So in my own case, being able to pastor people well, I love going to hospitals. I love making pastoral visits. I love, in a weird way, even doing funerals and connecting with a family that way. So that pastoring has very much fueled my preaching.